Well, good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast and good morning to everyone else in the United States. I'm General Tim Ray. I'm the commander of Air Force Global Strike Command, and I just want to say welcome to the AFA Strategic Deterrence panel. I think we have a great panel of military and industry partners for us all to spend some time with, and it's going to foster what I think is a great conversation. Let me first of all say thanks to our teammates at AFA. I certainly wish we could all be there in Florida. I missed the chance to sit and gather and talk about things. Maybe perhaps next year is the year that we can return to that activity, but certainly the chance to meet and talk about what's in front of us is so important. So I'm glad we're going to continue to do this at least virtually. Before we get started, I'd like to kind of frame the conversation. So we did run another panel with General Boussier out at U.S. Strategic Command and with the Vice Chairman and myself. We did talk a lot about the things that I think really drive this entire nuclear triad conversation. I'm not going to rehash all those points. I think that the feedback I've been given is it's been a pretty good conversation. And so we're going to kind of focus a little bit differently here today. What I do want to talk about is to move from simply what the triad does for us to actually what I think is really the important part is getting things done. We could talk about planning, we could talk about programs, but we actually have to get things done and we need to understand the situation we're in. If I could, let me just kind of begin with, at the end of the Cold War and certainly after Vietnam, it's probably where this best starts. We found ourselves in a pretty interesting place where we were really not ready militarily. We had a significant number of cultural problems. We had a very challenged force. We had perhaps really the wrong equipment. We didn't have the right relationships with Congress. The joint force wasn't really effective. We were staring down a very large Soviet capacity, both conventional and nuclear. And we had to rethink who we were and how we're going to go do business. And I think you can see that the things that have happened over time, what we did for arms control, what we did for modernization, what we did with the joint force with Congress and industry, and certainly what we did for the right kind of technologies, it ended the Cold War and it really played out, I think, in living color with everything in the Desert Storm. And so we've been on a counterterrorism focus for quite a few years. And I think we come out of that now with a very different appreciation for what's happening. And it's not unlike what we saw in the Vietnam, post-Vietnam era, where we have a lot of those same challenges that we need to go and reconsider. Let me just give another quick sense for everyone, not to be too policy oriented, but when I look around the globe right now, the thing I want to remind everyone is that we've never fought a nuclear armed adversary. And back in the Cold War days, that was a fairly straightforward conversation. The technology was a little bit simpler, a little more direct. But now we have to think about our partners and allies who are out there in the Pacific and Asia and Europe and around that have to deal with a nuclear armed Russia, a nuclear armed China. And while we may draw a distinction between what we do here in conventional and nuclear, it really is a different conversation for our teammates out there. And so when we start thinking about strategic deterrence, it has to be really thought about broadly about what those two players mean. It also has to be about how we deal with a North Korea and an Iran and their WMD game plan. And so when we start thinking about those, we know we have a very significant competition in front of us. And what I've learned over the years is that when you talk about getting better, you have to think about this with four pillars. The pillars I think that matter most are human capital, the infrastructure that's required to go do the things you need to do, and certainly the ability to manage and sustain technology in an affordable and an effective way. We do have some serious challenges on all three of those to go forward and to be very competitive in this strategic deterrence environment. And then what you really need is a planning and programming capacity that thinks about the future, about the CONOPS, but it comes back in and it spends some time on those other 3 pillars to make sure they're fresh and they're right and they're postured to deliver. And if you're really going to have staying power, you're going to have to revisit those pillars, but you're going to have the right relationships to go do what you need to do with this all volunteer force, with this high-tech society we live in, and the pace that things are happening. So I'm pleased to invite the members of this panel today. Let me start with some introductions, and then I'll turn it over to them for some quick comments, and then I'll hit them with the questions. And I promise I've saved the toughest ones for General Genetempo, as I always do. First of all, we have Lieutenant General James O.P. Dawkins, somebody I've had the pleasure of working with here recently. Currently, he's the Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategic Deterrence and Nuclear Integration, otherwise known as the HAF A-10. They're on the air staff. He's a bomber and fighter pilot with over 3,000 hours of experience, F-16s, F-111s, B-2s. He's been a squadron wing and a numbered Air Force commander. He's been the director at the National Security Council and a principal assistant deputy administrator at the National Nuclear Security Administration. I don't know of another officer who is as well-versed in the nuclear matters inside the United States military as O.P. Dawkins, and so we're really happy to have him here. We have Brigadier General, and who just came out on the 2-star list, which is great news for Augie Genetempo. He's what I would call an absolute acquisition expert. Currently, he's the commander of the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center and the program executive officer for strategic systems. He was an Air Force legislative fellow, and he was a program executive officer for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, where he managed a $92 billion portfolio. And where Augie and I have had a chance to work on is in a couple of areas with some fighter programs back when I was in AQP, and so worked the weapons portfolio. So it's good to have you around, Augie, and part of this panel. And then a very important set of guests that I think are really key to our success in the future are industry partners. And so we're really fortunate today. First up, we have Gregmanuel from Northrop Grumman. Greg is a vice president and general manager for Strategic Deterrence Systems Division in their space systems sector. His division is home for the ground-based strategic deterrent. He's been at this since the mid-'80s and just a great teammate going forward. Next, we have Mr. Dennis Donahue, the Vice President of Communications and Aerospace Systems at Raytheon. Mr. Donahue leads and oversees the Communications and Aerospace Management Systems organization, whose product portfolio includes protected satellite communications, cryptographic solutions, airborne mission computers, secure data links, and the identification front and forward, the IFF systems. So a very good set of skills to bring to this conversation. And then next we have Mr. Lawrence Semper, the Vice President of Classified Programs for the Broadband Communication System Business Unit for L3Harris, Technologies Communication Systems segment. The communication systems covers a very broad portfolio, including tactical and airborne radios, night vision technology, and defense and public safety works. Gentlemen, I'd like to go to each of you in the order that I introduced you. And just if you could give us a few thoughts on strategic deterrence from where you sit. And so, as I said, I'll go in order. Let me just start with you, Opie. Your turn. Can't quite hear you there.
I'm sorry. How about now? All right. Well, good morning. It's great to be here. Good afternoon to those that are listening from other places. It's an exciting time to be in DC right now as we have a transition from one administration to the next. I know General Ray. I just saw a smile from General Ray. He gives me a lot, saying it may be warm and hot and humid in Louisiana, but it's not DC. So I've got a lot of time here though, and I actually have enjoyed my time here, and it's really great to see our nation be able to conduct a transition like it does. I've seen a few of these up close. I see several familiar faces coming back into the national security enterprise, to include the nuclear enterprise. But of course, with a change in administration comes a change in perspective. But with that, with the nuclear enterprise, continuity is really the hallmark more than change. But I can talk more about that later during the Q&A session. With the new team, we'll see how this plays out. We'll see how much change, how much continuity exists. It's still early. The new team is still being formed. Just keep that in mind. What I'd advise folks and the nuclear enterprise is to be patient as we see where the Biden administration wants to go with the current plans. Just take a deep breath. We've been through these type of things before. I expect them to conduct a thorough review. They need to check our homework. In fact, I welcome that review, whatever that may be. It'll be our chance to show them that we have a pretty good modernization plan set up. And we'll also be able to demonstrate to them that how much the threat has changed even in 4 years. And it has. It has changed greatly even in those 4 years. The final thing I'll leave you with, at the end of the day, the deterrent, the triad is foundational to our defense. It underwrites everything we do as a nation. Every military operation we have ongoing, it underwrites. It's our nation's ace in the hole on our worst day. We can defend this country against existential threats. And that's one core tenet I don't think will change regardless of the review. Thanks, Joe Ray. Thanks for inviting me on the panel.
All right, Opie, thank you for that. General Tempo, over to you.
I'll say good morning from sunny Albuquerque, sir, and really appreciate you asking me to be on this panel, to join you today. And after your previous comment from your opening remarks, I'm guessing my other panel members are excited to have me here to field all those tough questions you're going to throw at me. So my thoughts on strategic deterrence from an acquisition guide. That basically means that the systems that I'm in charge of fielding for yourself, for Admiral Richard, for the president, have to have two characteristics. And those two characteristics are actually sitting in words on the wall right behind me. They have to be never doubted and they have to be always feared. Now, in our nuclear business, we talk a lot about absolutes. Never doubted to me means that our systems must work 100% of the time when we want them to, and 0% of the time when we don't. Always feared means that our adversaries know the capability they are facing is so overwhelming that it is going to change their behavior. And if their behavior is changed, then we have achieved the strategic deterrence that our national command structure needs in order to continue their work along the lines of diplomacy, education, other military actions, or economic actions in a much more stable environment in the world. So that's what I'm charged with, and that's what I'm excited to talk with you about here today.
All right, over to Gregmanuel in Northrop Grumman.
Hey, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon from northern Utah. Thank you, General Ray. Thank you for the AFA for continuing these opportunities to have these dialogues about strategic deterrence. I appreciate the opportunity to participate with both John Dawkins, John Tempo, congratulations, sir, and my fellow industry panelists. On a personal note, as General Ray referenced, I've been in this domain space for a long time, and I started on B2, so I've been with strategic bombers, strategic missiles, and all the other unique aspects of the nuclear enterprise. With this goal that General Temple referenced to deliver a safe and secure and effective nuclear weapon system to the Air Force. I've spent my entire career focused on the Air Force as a customer, not necessarily on purpose, but that's just the way it seems to be with all the exciting systems and opportunities that we have within the industry. Our biggest challenge today is not only our ability to modernize to meet today's requirements, but really to ensure that our systems are designed to be capable of evolving the future requirements. If you listen to General Ray's, General Hyten, General Boussier's panel this morning, you heard all about the fact that Minuteman was intended to be in the hole for 10 years, and now over 50 years later, is still in the hole. Our weapon system for GBSD is intended to be in the hole for the next 50 years. And as a result of that, we have to ensure that that weapon system can evolve with the change of the future requirements or the threat over the course of the next several decades. Our triad modernization we're expecting today, leveraging Open system design and modularity is key to allow this rapid and affordable technology insertion, especially for systems like these, which require service life, as I mentioned, over half a century. The design approach has the additional and equally important result of more efficient and lower cost day-to-day of operation and maintenance. We have to figure out a way to deliver to our warfighter a system that cannot be sustained at the same pace of cost as they are today. So looking to build in the artificial intelligence, the machine learning is quite important as we think about developing our weapon systems of the future. Couple that with even the closer Air Force and industry collaboration that is facilitated through these digital design tools, accelerated by agile software cycles, you start to see the exceptionally improved design and development cycles yielding, in most instances, more mature and lower risk solutions. So we're getting to market earlier and faster is something that's important. The threat does not wait around for us to deliver weapon systems, and our warfighter is demanding us to do things differently. This is what we mean when we talk about the need for today's digital transformation. And we'll talk a little bit about that in this panel. But this idea that we need to facilitate our ability to design, produce, test, deploy, maintain, and upgrade new systems and capabilities considerably faster and more affordably than we've ever done in the past. And I know we in industry are absolutely committed to look for opportunities to continue to shorten the overall timeline to get to market. That's just incredibly important. And we believe this digital transformation that we're all on will afford us that opportunity. Designing, developing, producing, and sustaining these safe and secure and effective, affordable strategic deterrent systems is simply what we do. And the Northrop Grumman team remains steadfast in our commitment to deliver these systems, as with the rest of industry and our industry-wide team, to the Air Force, and probably most importantly, on or ahead of schedule and on or under budget. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manuel. Over to Dennis Donahue, your turn.
Yes, thank you, General Ray, and thank you, AFA, for this opportunity to participate in the panel. I think I'm going to hit on some of the same themes that you've heard from the other panelists. You know, a secure and reliable nuclear triad and NC3 infrastructure remains our greatest deterrent against strategic attack on the U.S. At Raytheon Technologies, we're contributing to these deterrence capabilities through our work in long-haul, survivable, secure, and assured communications, through space-based and ground-based sensors providing decision superiority, through Collins Aerospace's support of the ground-based strategic deterrence program, as some examples. Now, in today's panel, we'll of course discuss the introduction of new weapons systems and new sensors to enhance strategic deterrence. But I would also like to go back, General Ray, to some comments you made last year to the Mitchell Institute on the importance of timely data and analytical tools to support decision-making. A common data architecture will be the foundation for what we call Joint All-Domain Command and Control, or JADC2, which we in industry see as a key enabler for modernizing our NC3 infrastructure. The capability to access data across the entire electromagnetic spectrum in a secure, resilient fashion is what will give our warfighters a decisive information advantage and the ability to make critical decisions ahead of our adversaries. The future, we believe, will be an open architecture, software-defined capabilities, enabling an enterprise framework that will allow, for example, multi-level secure voice and video applications. So by applying digital engineering, agile DevSecOps, and an open standard framework, we can facilitate the speed to capability. Imagine, for example, tying a handheld receiver in the field seamlessly to a space-based network. What we now call strategic and tactical communications will be just communications and will enhance the ability of our senior leaders to make decisions in a world where seconds can mean the difference between life and death. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to bring an industry perspective to the panel, and I look forward to the discussion.
You have some great comments there. Over to Mr. Semper.
Thank you, General. I appreciate this opportunity. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you today and to represent L3 Harris from my office in beautiful Salt Lake City, just south of where Mr. Manuel spoke to us. As you know, L3 Technologies and Harris Corporation merged to form L3 Harris Technologies about 20 months ago. And the combined might of L3 Harris is a company that truly provides a diverse portfolio to our warfighters in all domains. As you mentioned, I work in the communications segment of L3 Harris, where from a strategic deterrence perspective, we're teamed with the Air Force on various programs, and mainly the NC3 enterprise. I say NC3, but really we are proud to provide assured comms for what some in the Air Force call, and what I like to refer to as NC2 over assured comms. In fact, one of the directorates in my portfolio is called the NC3 and Senior Leader Comms Directorate. This entire team is dedicated to this mission and community. We welcomed the news of SecDef's decision to designate the commander, STRATCOM, as the lead for NC3 Enterprise. Of course, one of the results of that decision was the creation of the NC3 Enterprise Center, or NEC. In addition to Air Force Global Strike Command and its NC3 Center, we've appreciated working with the NEC at STRATCOM and look forward to their industry day next week, and certainly see the value in their helping focus the services and senior leaders in our nation's NC3 architecture and the importance of NC3 Next. I certainly look forward to our discussion, and thank you for the opportunity and to participate in this event. Certainly we've heard many key things that will be the topic of our discussions today, including digital engineering and JADC2, and I look forward to these discussions and learning from you today, sir. Thank you.
All right, very, very good. So my take right now as I listen to the opening comments, what I hope the audience would take is that, this is a sector of our military, it's the cornerstone of the security structure of the free world, but it's not simply a reflection of the old Cold War days. It's a team that's really thinking about the future in some very significant ways, and I think they get the score. As we ask these questions, what I'm going to try to drive home here is how much of this is, futuristic in its thinking, and how much of it is actually being applied. Because I think if you're not in this business, it becomes, something a little bit more aspirational. So let me go ahead with the questions. So let me go ahead and start with General Dawkins. You talked a little bit about this already, and if you could just kind of take one more layer of detail. There are a lot of voices out there regarding the triad and the modernization, and some of them actually understand all the moving parts and some don't. But few in uniform truly understand these issues, as I said, better than you do. Can you give me one more layer of detail, or the audience, about the kind of policy issues that are really there, where they really rest, and a significance of how much or how little they've changed?
You bet. Great question, sir. So, and you're right, there's definitely been a lot of chatter and discussion in the media surrounding what the future looks like with regard to the triad, or with regard to numbers, or nuclear modernization. Oh, and then occasionally somebody says something about policy, and that's exactly backwards. Most articles, again, they are on numbers, but what we need to be talking about is threat and policy and strategy. It's constructive to have that debate. I encourage the debate. I think it's a debate that needs to happen nationwide. I mean, with our citizens as well, but it has to be informed about the threat, and informed about the current state of our triad, which we all know here has been in existence, this current set of capabilities, for 50, almost 60 years. So I like to think of it this way: threat drives policy, drives strategy, drives capability, and all that is encompassed by arms control treaties that have been ratified and are in force, such as New START, which has been extended to 2026. So let's break that down a little bit. Start with the threat. Hey, the adversary is going to get a vote. We're facing 3 nuclear-armed competitors/adversaries right now. They're not only modernizing their arsenals, but they're also looking for novel capabilities out there to get at any gaps and seams with the United States. Russia, for instance, is 70% complete with their modernization efforts of their triad. They've been doing this already for 10 years. They have the capability to produce new weapons and new weapon systems, and they're doing that now, where we're only starting. Not to mention the work they've done on novel nuclear delivery systems, nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed cruise missiles, nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed, transoceanic torpedoes, if you will. These aren't covered by New START, and that's an important thing to remember. Moving over to China, we expect their stockpile to grow. I mean, we've always thought of them as a lesser nuclear power. That's going to change. And by the end of the decade, we expect them to at least double, and some are saying even much higher than that, their arsenal. Not to mention the fact that, you know, we talk triad. They have a dyad right now of ICBMs, many of them mobile, and submarines that can launch ballistic missiles. They're working to field a nuclear-capable bomber right now. So the threat, we've always got to keep that in the forefront. Moving to policy and strategy. So policy and strategy have and will be the prime driver behind the actions and programs. And this begins with the president. It begins at the top. This is unique compared to any other defense-related issue. These weapons and the associated employment strategy are closely controlled and approved by the President of the United States. And they have to be. Our United States credibility is on the line with these systems, and as well as with our allies. Our allies depend on these systems. You know, my time over at the White House, I saw how the president approved a stockpile plan. He knew the number of weapons that were going to be fielded by name and nomenclature every year. He signed something out that talks about that. He signs out the strategy and the policy. Again, that comes from the president. No other, it's not like that with, again, other pieces of the defense industry or the defense enterprise that we deal with. So he sets the tone. Moving over to capability. Again, Triad's 40 to 50 years old, and it's got to be replaced if we're going to have a credible deterrent. So going back to my initial discussion of threat drives policy, drives strategy, drives capability. If you come at that from the opposite direction, if you start with capability first, you may find yourself with a less credible deterrent in the eyes of the adversary and less leverage for future arms control negotiations. And that's a key piece that I think folks miss when they just want to start talking about numbers. And numbers are important, but that's got to be, I believe, in my opinion, the byproduct of the policy and strategy. Concerning continuity between administrations when it comes to nuclear issues, well, I see, well, we'll have to see what a new national defense strategy, if one is done, or a new NPR or similar review contain. But I'm confident, again, like I said in my opening remarks, that the deterrent is going to play a crucial role. We'll continue to play that crucial role as it underwrites our nation's defense against existential threats. There was a lot of continuity between the Obama and Trump administration NPR. In fact, there was way more that was the same than difference. The difference is, you know, that they added a few systems to the Navy, or at least talked about adding a sea-launched cruise missile. They also fielded a low-yield warhead. But ultimately, it was very similar. And if you recall, even back into when Secretary Mattis came in to the department, one of the first things he said was, hey, I'm not so sure we need ICBMs. They went through the review and he was convinced, well, actually, we do need ICBMs. So again, every administration, they have to take a hard look at this. But regardless, we should never be afraid to show our homework. And I think the Air Force is a great story to tell. The great work Augie's done, the great work your command's doing, and of course our industry partners on recapitalizing the nuclear triad, the pieces the Air Force owns. And hey, these programs come at a cost, but actually it's relatively inexpensive as a proportion of the total DoD budget. You know, 3 to 6%, depending on how you account for sustainment cost. And considering that the last time we did this was in the 60s and the 80s, yeah, it's a bargain. It really is, considering we've been able to leverage those systems for so long. But regardless of the outcome of what all these reviews look like, yeah, I know that the chief, you have to be a relentless advocate for these systems to ensure they're safe, secure, effective, and credible. Because what we can't do is just allow ourselves to rust into obsolescence, because the consequences of that failure is too high. Thanks for the question.
All right, thanks, Opie. So very much aligned with you on the why and the what. And I think when everybody considers that, you know, they're a little concerned about, you know, what's in the ground and how we've done things or what's on the ramp. You know, when I watch this business up close and personal, I get pretty enthusiastic at the things that have been laid, you know, in terms of groundwork. I know as the Commander of Global Strike Command, I'm looking at some incredible programs and some very deep insight. I do want to spend now some time talking about the so what of this, and let me turn to Greg at Northrop. You talked a little bit about digital engineering, and you talked a little bit about, what it means to you. To me, this is an incredibly exciting area, when you can look at 9, 10 design cycles and what's happened there. But you did allude to some things there, but what if I could get you to talk a little bit more specifically about the insights and things that you've gleaned now that you're leveraging digital engineering, and how has that really changed your thinking about the sustainability and the opportunities going forward?
I can, and it's quite ironic. Yesterday I had the opportunity to provide I don't know if it was provide a class, but provide a session with DAU 404 on digital engineering and this whole concept of digital transformation in this new world, and what is it? And so I don't want to get into what it is. Everybody's going to kind of define it differently. But one thing that I can say, and General Ray touched on it, is this whatever it is and however you do it, it's exploiting this opportunity to, again, as I referenced in my opening comments, to shorten the timeline. And General Ray referenced design cycles. On GBSD, we were able to during the tech map period, to turn actually 12 different design cycles in that 3-year time frame. That's unheard of in prior acquisitions. So it's been extremely effective on GBSD during this design and development activity. We are continuing to look for opportunities now to transition from this conceptual approach, or during the preliminary design, to now move to the critical design process. And how do you continue that momentum as you now are actually doing detailed design in your 3D design system? But for a system with as many moving parts as GBSD, and we're in the past that we've only been able to maybe fully model and assess a dozen or so less design options throughout the entire development period, to now get to be able to get through over a dozen design cycles just during the pre-EMD period is just quite something else. And it's only done through this idea of technology facilitating our ability to be successful. But culture has a lot to do with it. We can have the best tools and the best systems, and those best tools and best systems can run tens and thousands of excursions. But the resources, the human capital of culture doesn't facilitate everyone to operate in this new environment, you're still not going to be successful. So our ability to drive this on GBSD has just been an absolutely wonderful opportunity to, as using a General Ray comment, to watch the movie, right? To be able to just watch this has been extremely exciting. Another key difference in how digital engineering facilitates success is really driving what Jason Bartolome, the system program director on GBSD, calls radical teaming. Radical partnering. So this idea of now being able to live in this digital world facilitates this concept of radical partnering. There is nothing unknown between industry and the government that's going on in GBSD. And when I say the government, I mean big government. General Ray knows what's going on. Augie Jenna Temple knows what's going on. Everybody in the Pentagon knows what's going on. There's nothing not known of where we're at in the execution of this development program. So it's not just about digital engineering, it's about digital business. It's how do we digitize everything we do? And I'll tell you, and I'll be the first to admit, we would not be here. I think, and I can speak probably for most of industry, we would not be here at this level of capability without the commitment of the Air Force and the government. It was the Air Force who had the mindset or the opportunity to demand industry to change the way they do business, at least on GBSD in 2016 with the release of the ARP. So this idea of allowing for affording, with the commitment with the Air Force and industry to drive the necessary cultural shift throughout our organization, and quite frankly, the discipline to move away from and eventually eliminate this old way of doing business. I reference often in my speeches the day, and this is nothing against Microsoft, but the day we put PowerPoint out of business in our industry is the day we say we actually have now just begun our digital transformation. So we have to figure out how we get past this connotation of living in the model, where living in the model is just how we do. That's just how we do it. All right. And so anyway, so thanks goes out to the Innovation and Forward Thinking, for the Program Office on GBSD, the Nuke Weapons Center, Global Strike Command, for embracing and driving this change. We have a lot of cultural challenges ahead of us, but I think with the focus and the leadership, we're going to be successful in this transformation.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for that. Dr. Roper, before he left, he did call one of these, the GBSD, one of the E programs, and rightfully earned. It's just fantastic to watch. Pulling on that same kind of vein, we see a lot of things happening, in the digital side of the world and in the commercial industry. I mean, so digital design is one thing, but, really capitalizing on information and digits and data to think, just like we do in Travelocity and Waze, and, that's a fairly known thing. Let me turn to Mr. Semper at L3 and ask him, as you watch what's happening in the commercial world and you see how that operates, to many, it's fairly straightforward. It's a little more complex for applying that, I think. But how easy of a transition do you think that could be for us in the communication side of our business? And how much of an opportunity do you see, particularly on the strategic deterrence side, to leverage that really aggressive flow of data?
Thank you, General. That's a great question. Certainly, we live in a world where we've gotten very used to our commercial companies, tracking our data, collecting our data. The commercial world is certainly moving very quickly in the ability to collect all kinds of data, and is moving very quickly in the science of, I call it data analytics, or using that data to determine trends and intersections to make predictions or even decisions. Today, artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms determine how that data is used in the commercial world almost exclusively now. We've been looking at ways to leverage these commercially available advancements in data analytics and AI and ML as part of our NC3 efforts to be able to better predict network outages or hardware failures, link availability, to provide a more robust capability. Efficiently gathering data during operations and employing artificial intelligence, AI, ML, against that data through post-processing or even real time can really provide greatly enhanced situational awareness and enable a much more effective and resilient NC3 architecture in operations, and also used to detect or predict system failures ahead of time, enabling sustainment and logistics capabilities enhancements. Large commercial investments in this area can allow military systems to leverage this capability and take advantage of ongoing capability upgrades more rapidly than custom military solutions. I know the Air Force is already moving down this path with notable programs like the Vanguard Skyborg program. And I add my support to the adoption of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and provide options that provide information and options to decision makers and make automated decisions depending on the rules of engagement for particular situations. Is it going to be easy to apply that to the NC3 world and to strategic deterrence? Well, no, but I think there are certainly, low-hanging fruit, particularly in the data analytics and using that data to at least inform decision makers or to provide the enhanced logistics, predict outages and failures and things like that. So, we've certainly started down that path. The ability to monitor communications paths and provide options to decision makers is something that we're working very hard on now. Thank you.
So much like what Greg just said, it's really not so much a technical issue as much as it is a cultural issue.
Sure.
Right? It's entirely feasible, but it's the commitment to take it on and make it mainstream. When we talk culture, sometimes that's reflected in policy, and sometimes policy drives culture. Turning to General Tempo, you've been at this acquisition game for a long, long time, and you've seen the 5000 series get moved left and right, and a lot of things are new, and you're probably used to, I think, kind of getting pounded on for not going fast enough. When you look at this technological, ramp that we're all looking at, particularly for what we're doing here in this, what are the kind of changes you think we need to begin talking about in policy, or where are we not really operating within what we have for our boundaries, to make sure our acquisition programs move faster? You got things like 804 authorities and DevSecOps. Can you talk about how we need to probably lean into either capitalizing on those opportunities or asking for better authorities?
Sure, thanks, sir. I think Mr. Manuel hit upon a lot of the changes that I think we as an acquisition community needed to see, right? So, if we can roll back the tape and have him answer that on exactly what we need to be doing differently to ensure that acquisition is still relevant. The new authorities that we have received, 804, rapid fielding authorities, we are embracing them with both arms because, in my mind, this is the golden age of acquisition for the Air Force. It's something that people like me, when Dirk was young and I had a fuller head of hair, have been waiting for our entire career, right? And to get to these authorities, to allow us to go faster, to experiment, to fail, to try again, and to have the backing that that's okay, that's where we're going to see these iterations. The other biggest difference that I've noticed is that the forever promise of this thing called open systems architecture is finally here, right? We had open system architecture with air quotes around open, and we struggled through that. We then had, in parentheses, insert name of prime contractor, '(S), open system contractor. And we said, that's better, but it's not quite there. We are seeing across the board, GBSD is an amazing example, but that other programs in the Air Force, the Army, the Navy are seeing this as well, that a truly open design and a modular design, even if we have the shell of the system that is going to be around for years or decades, everything internal to that is now being designed to take advantage of the best of the subsystems that we have to offer. Guidance, navigation, and control, flight controls, propellant, engines, you name it. Our systems are now being designed to rapidly take advantage of those advancements rather than the Herculean steps that we have to go through to do an upgrade on our current systems to give them relevant capability. So I'm excited that we are finally seeing the hardware being produced that promises gives us the true promise of open systems. And Mr. Manuel said it as well, radical partnering. There was a time in Air Force acquisition when we were very synergistic with our industry partners. And then we moved away from that as an Air Force and as a government. And we are now back to rebuilding that. And there cannot be any fences, literally or figuratively. And when I take a look at my Northrop Grumman and program team, sometimes I can't tell them apart because the badges look the same. And they're occupying our spaces and we're occupying theirs. And we're spreading that across the government entities as well, specifically in test. And the coalition that we're putting together with my good friend, General Paisano out at the Air Force Test Center, and my next door neighbor, General Shredder Sears at Afotech, we are building a combined test force that lives in the same house and will be borrowing test points from each of their activities to give us the most efficient and most rapid turn that we can. So continuing to push for that. We can't stop now that the originator of the players that originated this drive have changed, right? It's up to people like us now to keep moving that forward, because I think if you ask anybody like me, we like where we're at and we want to keep it and we want to keep building on it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. you're exactly the right guy at the right time to have this conversation. And I'll come back to a couple of broader thoughts on that. Let me give Mr. Donahue a chance to talk, and let me come to you with what I think is a really, really important issue. You know, we have really old things in the field right now, and it's not just the people, right? It's the systems, of course, but, you know, STEM is such a big deal. You know, when I start thinking about that, you know, and the STEM graduates and the skilled workforce, I mean, it's not about the people that are out there, but the people to come. How hard is that to recruit and train and to get those folks to come be part of your conversation every day and to be on your team? Can you talk to that for a little bit?
Yeah, great question. One that we're all contending with, you know, in our organizations. Raytheon Technologies, a new entity, has 195,000 employees worldwide, and obviously a very high percentage with technical or engineering background. So, like all organizations, we are challenged to grow and to retain our technical workforce. And I would say today, kind of the game has changed a little bit. We're not only competing with each other within the defense industry, but we're also competing in a big way with commercial industry, which I think has been an evolution. So to be competitive in this kind of an environment, we have to rapidly transform the way we work. We talked a lot today about digital engineering. That is the new way of developing systems. This is what our employee base wants to see. They want to have different ways of getting at the answer as opposed to these very long scale, multiple cycles of development. And they want to modernize the way that we develop our products. I can't underestimate too the importance of the work environment, you know, that we're creating. This pandemic has really accelerated in some ways what I think we've all needed for some time is, you know, looking at different ways of working, a flexible work environment, a flexible work schedule. It's in some ways kind of forced it on us, and I think it's been healthy in the way that we've had to adapt. So we see that as also a key tool in attracting, retaining talent. Something that maybe is a little bit unique to our industry is that we're able to give our technical folks broad experiential opportunities across the entire life cycle of a product. When they come on board with us, they're able to work everything from design, development, through production, through sustainment, and see all of these phases in a very short period of time as they go through their stages of learning. And that is exciting and different. It's what you might get in other parts of the industry. Like all organizations, we're also working to increase the diversity of our workforce, and we need to better reflect the diversity of the workforce at large. Some examples, we've established a leadership development program and executive leadership programs that specifically target women and people of color. Our CEO, Greg Hayes, has recently set a target. He's been pretty public about to achieve 50% women in our senior leadership roles by the year 2030. So this is a goal that we're all working very aggressively to meet. And then STEM, generally, you mentioned STEM education. For all of us have been investing for years in STEM. One example I can give, we recently gave a $4 million grant to a newly formed Alabama School of Cyber Technology and Engineering. And this was a very targeted area to help prepare students for cybersecurity careers in government and industry. Just, another example of the changing technology and how we have to get ahead of it. For our own employees, we have enhanced tuition reimbursement programs. We offer advanced degrees, certifications at more than 220 colleges and universities, so that education is key in attracting and retaining talent. So, General, as you noted, it's a highly competitive market for talent out there within our industry. And as I said earlier, we are competing with commercial industry as well. So we need to rapidly evolve in order to attract and retain the best talent.
Yeah, I think it's a critical piece, and it's not just about the STEM, but your point about looking across the entire country, the major talent that's out there from every walk of life that has to come to the table to really produce these solutions. So, couldn't agree with you more. Let me hit on another kind of interesting leading edge thing. I'll go to Gregmanuel again at Northrop Grumman. When we did the assessment with Secretary Lord out there on how we're doing stuff, I got to see something that amazed me quite a bit. The containerized software, the Kubernetes approach to how we're doing things, and listening to the comment about people talking about it, but we're actually doing that. Can you give us a sense, you know, for how easy that is to do and the opportunities that presents us, particularly with a major system like this?
Yeah, I sure can. You know, it's not as challenging as it sounds, and it's not as daunting as we think. And you know, I think as we talked about culture at the beginning or earlier, you know, it's just different. It's just a different way of doing things. And you know, the applications that are out there today, you know, they're improving every day. But the key to a successful digital transformation implementation, you know, requires this tight collaboration between all things. And this idea of containerization or Kubernetes is just that. It's this ability to have this tightly coupling of what we do. And it doesn't matter how you apply it. You know, you take it in the software aspect of containerized software or Kubernetes, but you can apply this whole concept in really everything we do within digital engineering, on our digital transformation. Let me start off by maybe put it in the context of how we're doing it. You know, GBSD, I think, has been said by Dr. Roper and now talked about, you know, openly, is the first ACAT 1D program to transition to and fully utilize, you know, the department's Platform One, DevSecOps, Enterprise Service, and that's huge. And for those that really aren't familiar with what Platform One is, it's a collection of approved, hardened cloud, what they call cloud native computer foundation compliant Kubernetes. And it's really this ability to develop software in the cloud that is accessible by all the stakeholders who need to have access to that software. And it's containerized in a sense that different stakeholders, be it a cyber stakeholder, a security stakeholder, a nuclear stakeholder, can actually go pick up that container, move it into their space, and actually play with it, test it, stress it, make sure it meets all the requirements. That's completely different than how we've developed software and/or weapon systems in the past. And what this translates to in really plain English is our ability, as I said earlier, to develop and test and deploy, now focus on software, you know, secure software, you know, significantly faster. And even more so, it shortens this whole idea of the rework cycle. To be able to get software developed in the cloud, accessible by all those that need to see it, when they need to see it, it shortens this, what we refer to the rework cycle, but maybe the response of the testing process back to the designer to change or build in the features needed to actually get through the ultimate testing process. And as a result, you know, what this whole approach of containerized software is affording us is back to what we said earlier, getting through the development cycle quicker. And that's just going to be so important when we think about a schedule-driven program like GBSD to ensure that we are delivering the overall weapon system that will meet, as General Temple said, the stakeholders that we have inside our tent today, expectations when they actually see it in real time in a test environment.
So we're gonna get pretty close to the end. I'm gonna make a slight shift in the next question I'm gonna ask, and I'll ask each of you to hit it real quick. You know, just take one quick minute. The chief has told us to accelerate, change, or lose. You know, and he's given us as the MAJCOM commanders the guidance to proceed until apprehended. And I don't look over my shoulder 1 second to wonder whether or not, you know, I'm doing the right thing. The action orders are very helpful. But as you look at what we're doing, and I'm the officer singularly accountable to the chief and the secretary for the nuclear arsenal, going forward, if you could give me one piece of advice on what we should do better to make sure this all works right and well, I would love to hear your quick parting thought on that point. Let me start with Opie, and I know that's the A10 telling the 4-star to Hey, here's my advice, but I think you know me well enough, as does Augie, that I'm honest when I ask for that opinion.
Make sure, thanks. So I think we need to streamline our capability development. You know, in years ago, decades ago, we had such a technological leap over our adversaries that we have this bureaucratic, you know, all-encompassing process, JSIDs, all these manuals, and could have, you know, take our time to develop new technologies. So whatever we can do now that the adversary is catching up and in some cases actually surpassing us or quickly getting to that point, whatever we can do to expedite the fielding of added capabilities. Once we field a system, you know, and that's going to require stable requirements until it gets fielded. But if we can come up with a system that we're able to rapidly field additional capabilities or even current capabilities, I think that's going to be key to accelerating change and to prevent us from losing the competition with our adversaries.
Greg, to you.
I think I want to say stay the course, and I put it in the perspective of, because we are already on an accelerated change. So if we stay on the trajectory that we're on collectively on GBSD, as you referenced earlier, sir, I think this is going to mean something. It's going to mean something, as John Temple said, to the larger acquisition community. And if we can stay the course, continue to share our lessons learned, the good and the bad, and continue to stay on the trajectory, I think we're just going to be absolutely knocking it out of the park.
All right, thank you for that. Augie, to you.
Hey, sir, the biggest thing I would say to achieve, accelerate, change, or lose is to invest in the infrastructure that we need to transfer data at all levels of classification. If you help unhinge that door and unlock that potential for us, and there is already a lot of excellent work going on. We have made so many strides in the past year because of the pandemic, ironically enough, that are now showing us that it is in fact possible if we have that infrastructure in place. I can reach out to so many different places. I can get data moved so much faster, and I can accelerate that change the chief is talking about. So that would be the biggest thing that I would push for and continue to push for. We already are. It's got to go to the next level.
Yeah, thanks, Augie. I agree with you. Dennis, to you.
Sir, I'll go a slightly different direction, which is the way that we contract for work, I think, has to catch up with how we develop systems. Some of the conversation that we've had today, first of all, about speed and agility. And certainly there are new applications, OTAs, IDIQ contracts, new ways of getting contracting out there that does help get us faster to market. So that's certainly a step. But I think more generally, what we hear a lot about is you don't no longer need the 100% solution. You want the 80% solution or the 85% solution. The problem is our contracting framework is not designed that way. You know, we all come from an environment where it's all about strict requirements, flow down, 100% adherence to requirements. You know, we use that word compliant a lot. Is it a compliant solution? You know, you want the ability for us to give you the 80% solution, to be able to make those trades and be cost effective where we can. So I think we need a contracting structure that enables it. And that's probably one area that will really help us to give you those more rapid capabilities.
Yeah, great feedback on that. Lauren, to you.
Yes, thank you, sir. So many good comments already, many of them that I would echo and would have said. I guess going last here, you know, certainly echoing General Jenna Tempo's comments about rapid prototyping, the ability to succeed fast and fail fast, and with Dennis's comments about contracting, allowing that capability is something that would certainly be beneficial. And then, you know, one of the challenges that we face in innovation in this area especially is, you know, maintaining the clearances to be involved in these areas, you know, across the corporation. That's sometimes a challenge, and clearances take time with the rapidly, you know, changing commercial environment. And as Greg mentioned, you know, we often compete with the commercial world for the same engineers, and having the ability to, you know, maintain some clearances and cleared facilities is certainly an important aspect in innovation for this environment.
Yeah, thank you for that. To each of you, let me just say thanks for taking the time with us today. I love the conversation. You know, let me also take a quick chance to say to everyone who tuned in, thanks for taking the time, and absolutely to AFA for running this thing. Just a couple of parting thoughts. You know, the threat is real, and as it's been laid out here, and it's just a context we can't escape, right? There's a very significant existential set of circumstances on the table. But I hope what you took from this conversation was a ray of hope, right? We've talked in the past about an industry and military relationship. We talked about acquisition reform and going faster. You know, what I see across this portfolio being in the middle of this, and for all of our junior members in the military, let me just tell you, one of the coolest things we do, it's not just to operate the equipment, but to build it and to field it and to put it in the, you know, in the field to go do the job. It's an amazing process, but you should gain from this, that this entire portfolio is informed by some pretty amazing things that folks are talking about. This particular sector is actually doing it. And I think it's been successful. I certainly would tell you that I've got a great team around me across the enterprise. I'd really be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my teammates in AFMC and Arnie Bunch and his team. The enterprise has just lifted huge. And so to each and every one of you, thanks for being on this team. And for those of you out there listening, I appreciate your service and all that you do for our country. So I'll take this opportunity to sign out and say thanks. Have a great weekend.